Oh, hi, what's up?
Hi, how's it going?
It's going one day at a time. Same as always.
Same as always. Well, thanks for having me back. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Getty. I make YouTube videos. I talk about liberalism and history and culture and all that. But today I was curious to get your thoughts on the growth of democratic socialism in the Democratic base, like as an identifier. I saw a poll the other day, I think it was CNN, they were talking about percentage of Democrats that identified as Democratic Socialists, and they said it was somewhere around 30%. I was curious if you had any thoughts about that.
I think it's incredibly negative, and I think we should excise that language as much as possible from our vocabulary. And personally,
Democratic Socialism.
all versions of the word socialism. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a theory about this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it because I guess I should get your thoughts on this first. Do you think the majority of those people
No.
who identify as democratic socialists understand what that means?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No.
And is your theory
Yeah.
going to be that when people hear democratic socialist, that's like the stand-in now for kind of the word like progressive, like they just want the government to do more stuff?
Basically,
Yeah.
right? They understand democratic socialism to be a particularly aggressive, redistributory form of liberalism, right? Which is a thing that used to exist within American liberalism. I don't know. You might think of someone, gosh, I don't know, like RFK Sr. or someone like that. You know, the current freak jobs father.
Yeah.
You know, was very interested in redistribution and that sort of stuff. So I think, do you think that there's anything that the current Democratic Party can, or that liberals, I should say, can learn from the fact that there seems to be an appetite for that sort of thing? Because even whenever the Democratic Socialists talk about the things that they support, a lot of the time there's really not that. I mean, there's nothing inherently incompatible with liberalism, with what the Democratic Socialists are saying 99% of the time.
Okay, so this is like a big thing that I've been harping on, and I bring this up basically now all the time because I'm a one-track record or whatever the fuck you call it, that I think has to be underlining basically all of our conversations. I think that for the human body, right? You know how we have like a bunch of different organ systems that all work together, and like they all have to be working for anything to work. Like you can't say like, oh, like I don't have any kidneys, but it's okay because my liver is like really strong, or like I don't have any lungs, but that's okay because my heart beats like really hard. Like all of these systems always have to be working together to get like the human body to exist. One thing that I've been harping on for maybe more than a year now is on the Republican side of their messaging apparatus. When they've put their mind to getting like a message out or doing something, every single part of that apparatus comes together to do that thing. So like the president will say a thing, cabinet members will repeat the same thing, mainstream media, Fox News will say the thing, alternative media will say the thing, social media will say the thing, Russian bots will say the thing, right? It's like top down enforced orthodox opinion, like on every major administrative talking point, generally speaking, right?
Sure.
On the liberal side, we don't have that at all, okay? You're getting fucked everywhere. If the president, Biden, says a thing, he might be getting criticized tomorrow by Jake Tapper, the next day by every alternative media leftist, and then by center-left libs who don't want to be seen as being cucked out to the party or whatever. So we have a really hard time at synchronizing messages like that, okay? So I say all of that to say that I think the question you asked me is like, what should the party do kind of with relation to the blossoming of this term? I don't feel like the party can do anything because nobody in any part of our body, our apparatus, all of our different organ systems are always working against each other, doing different things. So it's very hard to coordinate any type of thing like that. Okay. So getting all of that out of the way, here are my big issues. I think I have three big issues with this. My first issue is there's a very scary, I don't know if you call it a no true Scotsman fallacy that gets played with these words liberalism and socialism. So one is every single good thing that liberalism produces gets claimed by socialism. And so the only stuff that's left is bad stuff that all gets blamed on liberalism. That's number one.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
Liberalism, I think, gets equated with just modernity in a way. Like everything that's bad about the status quo is liberalism. right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. What's the second
No,
thing?
I agree with you there. The second thing is that I do think that there is a highly subversive group of people, especially online, who are actively trying to invade and then, I'll use a nice word, radically change the Democratic Party to be an actual socialist party. So an anti-liberal, anti-capitalist, like in the most extreme sense of the word, your Hassan Pikers, your tankies, basically, your ML people. I think that those people are really enjoying the resurgence of that term because it lets them pivot between masks easier. One,
For certain.
two, three.
And that's one
Yeah,
of the
go ahead.
reasons why that's why I'm so interested in having this conversation, because I think that there's a lot that we can learn from their success, while at the same time, recognizing that, we're not trying to have some sort of revolution or something like that.
Sure.
But if we understand democratic socialism to be basically just the latest manifestation of the desire in the Democratic Party base for a more aggressive form of liberalism, or a liberalism that supports more redistribution, or a liberalism that's more forthrightly anti-corporate. I think that that's a niche that can be filled by liberals.
It can be, yeah.
Like there's nothing. So, I take it for granted that, politicians and serious people who call themselves democratic socialists, they are socialists. I take it for granted. I feel like if you're going to take the hit of calling yourself a socialist in the American political environment, you have at least some commitment to that term. But your average person, and I think you can look at it with the language that's most persuasive from the democratic socialists. It's all like rights-based language. Like people have a right to healthcare. People have a right to this or that. People have a right to, X, Y, Z. And that's fundamentally liberal language, I think. They're not talking like we need to mobilize the proletariat, against the bourgeoisie most of the time anyway. I mean, you never hear successful democratic socialist politicians talking like that. You hear them talk in rights-based language, in very like piecemeal, welfarist, reformist language. And that's a lane that liberals could absolutely thrive in. And it's not a territory that we should cede to people who, like you are saying, are people who want to transform the Democratic Party into a kind of different thing.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily disagree with you. So the third issue that I have relating to a lot of the socialist stuff, and then we can harp on any of these three, is that I really don't think that the way that people complain about issues sometimes, this has been one of my biggest pushes against like things like misinformation and stuff, is that one thing I say a lot is there are good conversations we could be having, but the discourse is held hostage by so many stupid myths that it's impossible to actually make progress on any of these issues. So when you talk about like rights-based conversations related to like healthcare or housing, these are incredibly complicated topics that I think there is like room for improvement in how we do healthcare and housing in the United States, but there are like a lot of uncomfortable topics or truths or aspects of these things that make it very hard to have like true conversations about them. So like, for instance, when it comes to healthcare, right? Like for all the polling that I've seen shows that for better or for worse, most Americans are happy with their healthcare, probably because they get it through their job, they're not sick all the time, and they tend to be okay with it. And that to make big changes to our healthcare system means that you're going to have to be willing to rock the boat on that. Now, I don't think that's a blocker for doing healthcare reform. Like, oh no, like most Americans are happy with it, leave it alone. But like, if we pretend that that's not the reality and we just approach the situation like people do online, where they say, oh no, like everybody hates it, so it should be easy to change, which is kind of like the ultra progressive or kind of like this new socialist MO, where they basically operate under this assumption that everybody would agree with us if they just knew exactly what we were saying. So we just would say it louder, which is why they never changed their strategy, despite not having any electoral success, really. I think that kind of populist talk hurts a lot of the conversation. Same thing with like housing is another big example of that, where most Americans, I think it's 70% is the last number I saw, live in a home that is owned by somebody. And when you talk about bringing down the price of rent or the cost of rent, or you talk about bringing down like the cost of housing, you're talking about hurting really every single person that's own a home, because you're talking about hurting the price of their house. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't help that problem, that we shouldn't find a way to bring down the cost of rents or whatever, but there's always like countervailing forces, and people simplify the conversation so much that you wind up in the same trap that like the Trump admin is right now, where they played into a lot of the populist rhetoric, they got into office, and then, whoop, I guess none of those problems were as simple as they thought, and now nothing actually gets solved, and then people just are back at, square one. We're like, what's going on? Like, it must be the elites or somebody that's blocking everything,
For sure. And absolutely, it's important to talk about the how of these things, because you don't want to promise things that are impossible to achieve. But I also think it's important to recognize that, I don't know how you feel about this, but, as someone that's a liberal, I'm generally committed to freedom and equality equality between people. And I'm committed to some sort of social cohesion. You can call that fraternity, you can call that whatever you want. And I think that people should have the ability to pursue happiness how they want to pursue happiness. And I think as an end, people having healthcare is a good thing.
For sure.
People having housing is a good thing. And so, you can, I think the fact that the democratic socialists so often fall back on this rights-based language really shows that there's a commitment to a fundamentally liberal idea here that can be capitalized on.
Wait,
and
so we just pushing you on that a little bit. I understand kind of what you're saying, in that like fundamentally the ability to have equal access to these things exists in a liberal paradigm. But I mean that in an ideal world, right? That exists in a fascist paradigm, that exists in a socialist paradigm as well, right?
Yeah, well, it depends on why we want to have them. If you're saying like X is a human right, human rights, there's critiques of the very idea of human rights that aren't as things that don't literally exist. That they emerge from like the material, relations between people. And gosh, it's been so long since I've read Marx, but I'm pretty sure Marx calls human rights, the manifestation of like the bourgeois value system, imposed upon people. And that doesn't mean he doesn't like, the human rights, the liberal human rights better than, what came before. But he doesn't think that they are important in the same way that like a liberal would. And, a more classical socialist would emphasize the material, I think, much more than these kind of rights-based justifications for things. Is my understanding.
Sure. Although, I feel like, and I don't know, because fuck philosophy, but like at the end of the day, I'm sure that a lot of these will start to blend into each other as well, right? That if we think of like the freest type of human being ever would be a human being stranded in the middle of a forest that has no rights or obligations to anybody whatsoever, right? But then obviously, right, well, okay, hold on. Maybe if he has to give up a little bit of freedom in order to have like a roof, some clothes, and some food, maybe that's better for him. And then on the other end of things, like a person with the maximal material wealth or availability to him, but doesn't have the freedom or luxury to choose between anything, and his whole life is dictated to him, probably wouldn't be good. So like, I'm sure these things blend in or bleed into each other a little bit, but
absolutely. But that's sort of what I'm saying, right? Is that what the democratic socialists are promising people is not necessarily, at this stage anyway, is not all that different from what liberals could be promising people.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah. Well, so I don't disagree with you there. Although my second point about like the subversive aspects of the people who are actually socialist, like socialist, is if we give too much on the socialism talking point, such that people are warmer towards like the socialist people, those people would say that the natural inherent contradictions of capitalism and the struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat or whatever, the capital owner and the laborer, would like necessarily make it manifests in society in multiple ways that make it impossible for any type of true material or rights-based equality to be achieved, which like they would say is literally impossible under liberalism, which is why they always view Democrats and Republicans as both being closer together than like Democrats and Demsocs or whatever for the socialist people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I just disagree with that kind of I don't know what is that, historical materialism. I just disagree with that interpretation of reality.
Sure.
I don't think that the inevitable contradictions in capitalism are going to bring the system coming crashing down. I think there's a reason why we saw the socialist revolutions in, relatively underdeveloped societies rather than the most advanced societies, as would have been predicted by like classical Marxism. And of course, there's been tons of additional scholarship on applying Marxism to this and that case. But
to be clear,
of,
I wouldn't disagree with you there, but that is the argument that the other side feels very strongly for.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that just because when we look at like the recent drama that's broken out around this, would you rather vote for J.D. Vance or Gavin Newsom, that conversation is heavily informed by the socialist types who view Democrats and Republicans as both upholding the same type of capitalist liberal bourgeois oppressing proletariat system, which is why they're so easy to lump in like J.D. Vance and Newsom together, which again, I agree with you is stupid, but yeah, I think it heavily informs
I find that ridiculous, but I find it a serious problem that a lot of people are attracted to at least a label that is somewhat captured by those types of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whenever the things that are attracting, at least in my view, the things that are attracting people to the Democratic Socialist label in the first place, like a right to healthcare, a right to housing, a right to, basically, real freedom. That's the pitch. It's real freedom for all people, not just the rich. That's the basic democratic socialist pitch that's being sold to people. But then, you again, like you've been saying, there's some people in that space that are happy to say utterly ridiculous things like J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom. There's no meaningful difference between them, and I think that's bad. And so if we accept that there's a certain pitch that's being made to, and that is attractive to like 30% of the Democratic base, but there's nothing really there that's incompatible with liberalism. I just think that there's some things we could learn from that.
Sure.
Being more aggressive, talking about, right to healthcare, right to housing, talking about being, anti-corporate whenever the corporations are being materially harmful to freedom and equality. I mean, I think a good example would be all the integration that's been happening in the second Trump term between these businesses owned by people who are forthrightly anti-liberalism, anti-democracy. Elon Musk is a good example. How many times a day does he tweet about his like white nationalist lunatic ravings? I mean, he does this like all the time. Peter Thiel, like a decade ago, was writing about how freedom and democracy are no longer compatible. And, Palantir, not to get too conspiracy brained about Palantir, but it's an incredibly important company. It's used all over, Fortune 500 companies. It's used all over the U.S. government. And it's owned by a guy who thinks fundamentally that the U.S. government should be privatized.
Yeah.
And turned into like these weird techno-feudal states. I mean, corporations like that, I don't think that there's anything illiberal about saying that they need to be purged with fire. And if they can't be removed, then they need to just be taken under the control of the government or something, because it's an insider risk at that point.
Yeah. I definitely don't disagree with you there. I do think when I look at a lot of the socialist talking points, I look at a lot of like the MAGA talking points, I do see this kind of this similarity. I call it populism, I guess. When I think of populism, I'm just kind of thinking in my head of there is some vague kind of elite thing. That might be politicians, it might be businesses, it might be globalists or whatever. And then there's going to be some like kind of outsider who's leading the charge against this they, them, not in the trans, well, sometimes in the trans sense, but like the whatever, it could be the Jews or whatever, right? And they're trying to deliver you into a better world. And one thing I think that it's really important to learn from MAGA, and I think it probably applies to the socialist group as well, is these people don't really care about necessarily the things that they're talking about, but they're all proxies for other issues. So like when conservatives say things like, I don't like regulations, and then they champion for like the biggest expansion of ICE. Dude, I went back and I looked at One Big Beautiful Bill after all this ICE shit. I didn't realize how huge the funding increase was. I don't know why. It just never really factored in my brain. Oh my fucking
It's
God.
like more than the Marines now.
Even
right?
just
It's
$100 billion is an insane amount of for ICE. Okay, not for all of DHS, all of immigration stuff, not for the entire feds, just for ICE. For ICE, which
to turn it into the president's private police force. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
So like when conservatives say things like, I don't want more regulations, that's not true. They love certain types of regulations, right? Or when liberals say things like, oh, I don't like, I don't like corporatism or corporations or big business, that's not true either. If you have corporations that are in charge of like environmental stuff, or like you can find things that people will support that fall outside of the binary, like I don't like this thing, or versus I do like this thing. I think it's important to figure out what those proxy values are and not to get too hung up on the words that people are saying.
Sure.
Yeah. It's like if you have a kid who's saying that like I hate you, and it's like, well, actually you're 4 years old and it's 3 p.m. and you haven't had a nap yet. I think you just need to take a nap, right? That's why you're saying that, in that kind of way. Not to be as condescending, but yeah, I think it's important to figure out where these complaints are coming from too. Oh, you can also see this as well in the YouGov polls. It happens with Democrats. It really happens with Republicans. But when you ask people what their outlook is like on the economy or like how are you doing, it'll be like when it's the second the new president comes in, the Republican side changes like 70 points from like I'm in dire financial straits, my life is over, everything is terrible, to everything is looking up, it's great, it's amazing. And it's like, okay, well, did your life really change that much, or just kind of your perspective on the same set of facts,
Yeah, that is an argument that I often point to for people who think that this is a strain that you sometimes see in kind of the election Twitter type discourse, where there's people who talk about the best strategy for Democrats is just to like maximize the polls, to pick things that are popular in the polls, and to take those positions instead. Mm-hmm. But then you look at that flip, like on the economy. You look at maybe even more substantive, like how Republicans flipped on tariffs as a policy, for example. And I think what you see isn't a public who's super interested necessarily in like economics. They're using economics as like a proxy for all these other things.
Or even more specifically, imagine we're so close right now. Not really. Like, in fact, we are, but like in reality, we're not. We're so close to having a VAT, right? You got Americans somehow, the conservatives, to accept a universal tariff on every single product that we import, And like, who could have imagined that would have been something thrust upon the Republican Party and that they would accept it gleefully, right? That's crazy. So something is happening there that's not tracking, the words that they're saying,
Yeah, well, I think what happened in that case was that Donald Trump made a successful pitch to the Republican Party that tariffs, or I should say that trade, was part of foreign exploitation. And preventing exploitation by foreigners was basically a huge part of the Trump pitch generally. Preventing exploitation by foreigners in the form of immigration, preventing exploitation by foreigners in the form of, China undermining us, or Europe taking advantage of us, or, he had other things too. But that was a huge part of his pitch, and he managed to integrate trade into that narrative that he built about us being exploited by foreigners. And through that narrative, he was able to flip the Republican Party's position on trade, on tariffs. Yeah. I guess bringing it back to what you said about what the foundational values are. I mean, I think about this a lot because sometimes people ask me, what is liberalism, or why do I support it, or what am I trying to do here? So I think about the foundational values sometimes, and I think, well, I guess maybe I should ask you, like, what do you think your foundational values are? Why do you find yourself committed to this kind of philosophy?
For me, I think it would be I like maximal freedom and choice and opportunity to choose or do whatever. I don't think necessarily everybody feels the same way about that, though. But I guess my personal drive towards life, which is also going to coincidentally line up a lot with where I was born and everything else, of course, obviously, right? Because that influences us. But I feel like liberalism at its best is there needs to be some loose framework that we all kind of agree to. You know, it used to be kind of like Christian Judeo values or Christianity or whatever. I don't know. There has to be like some kind of loose framework that we're all kind of committed to. And then liberalism has to give you the means and tools within that framework to pursue whatever you feel like is the, you know, is like the greatest good or the best version of yourself or the best version of what you can have for you and your family. Yeah. I think it's sometimes it's like an unsatisfactorily broad statement. And I think that's kind of a weakness in liberalism, but I think it's also, you know, in a kind of ironic way, it's kind of a strength of liberalism as well. I think I don't know if it was Noah Smith or somebody, but I read an article once about how the big strength of liberalism that it can basically just absorb anything. It's like the world culture. You know, if you think of an idea, it could be radical socialism like Hassan Piker, it could be fascism like Nick Fuentes. Like a liberal framework can literally absorb all of these different ideas into itself and even like commoditize them and make them, you know, work to some extent, which is again a strength of liberalism and a weakness of liberalism. So yeah, basically just like go ahead.
Allowing disputes to be able to be settled democratically is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
And that's a big advantage of liberalism. I agree that it is nice in the ideal sense. You know, we have this overlapping consensus. Is the term that John Rawls would use for what you described there. You know, having this, you know, we broadly agree on this set of values. We broadly agree, you know, how we're going to settle elections, how we're going to, you know, what kind of society we are. Increasingly, I think the right wing does not believe in that overlapping consensus anymore. And, you know, there's some of this on the left. I think it's not nearly as advanced. I mean, I think what we're seeing in the United States generally right now is the right has become an illiberal faction in American politics. Illiberal in the sense of like not believing in liberal democracy. And the left is absorbing the people from the right that believed in those things, that actually believed in, you know, what the Declaration of Independence says.
Sure. I don't know about that so much yet, or what you mean by the left is absorbing them. Like, I feel like the Never-Trumpers, like those types of people are still kind of floating out there. I don't know if the left does necessarily absorb them, but they're definitely more politically homeless than they were before. Yeah.
I feel like they vote for the Democratic Party, basically, don't they?
Well, what percentage of people? Like
people?
This would be like 1%, maybe.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge group of people.
Sure.
But there's, you know, I think it's, well, yeah, it's sort of immaterial, I guess, because it's a small group of people. You know, the the educated centrist who comes to the conclusion that they're a centrist by, you know, analyzing every policy in detail and just coming to the conclusion that a centrist position is best is a very narrow type of person.
Gotcha,
I think.
Sure, yeah, I agree.
But so yeah, maybe it's sort of immaterial. I think whenever I think of why I'm committed to liberalism, I think about how I want a society that's free. I want a society where people are equal, and I want a society where there's, you know, some commonality between people, where, you know, we have some sort of social cohesion.
Yeah. Where
people, you know, these are things that I want in a society. And I just look at what's happening on the Democratic Socialist side of the Democratic Party right now. I look at the kinds of things that they're pitching, and I don't see a ton of problems with it, I guess. You know, like the idea from a liberal perspective anyway, you know, I might have disagreements with them on policy implementation, but from a perspective on whether or not it's compatible with the Democratic program, I don't think there's a problem. Do you think that there's an inevitable collision course between the Democratic Socialist electeds and I guess maybe you would call the Democratic Socialist activists, the more like extreme people?
So here's another kind of annoying divide right now that exists, and I think it's been incredibly damaging to our party, is that I don't remember if we talked about this last time. If you're as a YouTuber, if you talk to people and you go on stream, so I'm sure you talk about a lot of the same subjects. So if I repeat something, tell me we've already covered this. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But like one of the annoying issues is that on the right, I feel like everybody is playing the game of politics. So they're trying to exercise political power over another person. They're trying to get their people elected so that they can have power in our democratic system. And then online, I feel like a lot of the far left people, the socialist types, anybody that would call themselves a socialist, those people are not playing the game of politics. They're playing a social media game that's kind of masquerading as politics. And so I think that when a lot of people are trying to look at like, oh, so there's a saying that a lot that the left purity tests and the right never does this. That's not true. The right does purity test harder than the left does, but they do it around voting for Trump. If you say you're not going to vote for Trump, it's over for you, right? That's the most important thing to them. Any other idea they don't care about, but you have to be willing to support Donald Trump. You have to support the Republican candidate. On the left, online, there's a lot of purity testing related to like Israel, Palestine, or universal health care, or whatever, UBI maybe, I don't know, stuff like this, but it's never over electoral things. If anything, they kind of eschew like the electoral stuff, where they're, both sides are the same, who cares, it's whatever. We don't vote for anybody. It's all going to be the same corporate overlords at the end of the day anyway. And I think that's a big problem because it leads to this world where the right is able to build, now this is going to bite them in the ass right now, a huge coalition of different types of voters who only care about getting the Republican elected. And then on the left, all the people online that are kind of holding a lot of our online conversations hostage on the left don't care about winning elections at all. So when you ask me that question of like, do you think there's going to be we're going to come to a head between democratic socialists and, normal Democrats? For the elected ones, no, but there are very, very few elected ones. There's like one or two maybe, Mamdani maybe, and
not many.
What?
Not many.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no.
And maybe Ilhan Omar. I don't even know if AOC is included in that group anymore, depending on who you talk to. So the elected people are different though than the online people who do not care about winning elections ever. And I think that's a frustrating aspect of our political conversations right now, is that so many people who don't care about winning elections are holding our conversations hostage online.
Yeah. Where do you think the audience for those types of people comes from? Is there just like a pent up nihilism in the American left that's being expressed through those people, or what is it that attracts so many people to the Hassan Pikers of the world? This
isn't an insult because a lot of this describes my audience too, but I think a lot of it comes down to just demographics. So a lot of the people are going to be younger, they're going to be whiter, they're going to be more affluent, they're just going to be better off in general. So we can kind of have these, I call these kind of, or I don't call it, I've read this before, they're called like luxury positions or luxury values. So for me to say something like, the ACA, I don't care if they bring down my premiums by 20%. If we don't have if we don't have universal health care, I don't want anything, right? That's a luxury position because at the end of the day, it won't affect me one way or another because I can always afford my health care. I don't actually care whether or not it gets passed. I'm going to be fine no matter what. But for people where the incremental change does manifest in a real way, I don't think those people are as attracted towards those political systems, but the online world already kind of chooses for a younger, wealthier, whiter audience just because of the demographics of the online world. That's why whenever you go to like a socialist meetup or whatever, it's like overwhelmingly younger, whiter college kids, not pure white, not pure young, not pure college kids, but like I feel like overwhelmingly it's represented by those demographics.
The young part is interesting. I feel like I read an interesting article one time about how the DSA used to feel like an old folks home before like Sanders in 2016, and then like they got an infusion of all these like young people who were becoming affiliated with DSA, and then there was I don't know, there's like a history of the DSA article that I think I read. It was by someone who left like a few years ago, I think, over something to do with Israel Palestine.
Sure,
but
that wouldn't surprise me if before Bernie, because socialist was kind of a bad, for whatever reason. Wait, how old are you again? I know I asked you this last time.
I just turned 25.
Okay.
Just turned 25.
So back in the days of Obama, if you listen to right-wing media, socialist was a huge slur. Nobody wanted to be a socialist. Nobody on the left. That was it's the equivalent to fascist today. They'll never admit that, but it really was. Calling somebody a communist is the equivalent to calling somebody like a fascist or racist or whatever today. So I feel like Bernie Sanders brought a lot of energy into that term, into that movement, and then that got a ton of young people kind of more interested in ascribing that label to themselves. So it wouldn't surprise me if the DSA was a bunch of older folk who believed in, like actual socialist values or concepts or whatever from, a bygone era. And now there's kind of a lot of younger people flowing into that movement now. Yeah.
What would you say are the feelings or words most associated with liberalism today? Oof. If you would say that before socialism, it just sort of reminds me because maybe before 2016, socialism was associated in a lot of people's heads with like a tired kind of old ideology that sort of radical, but in a not very interesting way, if that makes sense. And then maybe after 2016, it got some more like youthful energy. It got some more, I guess, credibility. So it got new associations. I guess what words would you associate with liberalism today?
I think this would very much depend on who you're asking. Can you give me like what crowd would you pose this question to?
Well, I guess just you, Stephen, first.
Well, for me, I mean,
And
I
then,
associate liberalism with, I think a lot of our Bill of Rights is kind of like like liberalism. So your First Amendment rights, your right to like stuff related to criminal procedure, right? Like you have to read me charges and I get a lawyer. Like there's a lot of liberty protections, for me, a lot of negative rights that are ascribed to me, like in a broad sense. And then capitalism, I loosely associate capitalism with liberalism just because the right of like free enterprise and free association is kind of like loosely entangled there. Although there are theoretically other economic frameworks that could incorporate like liberal values or liberalism inside of them, but loosely speaking,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess then what do you think the average, like, relatively politically engaged person would associate with liberalism?
The politically engaged, I would say broadly speaking,
someone who votes, someone who votes.
Oh, well, those are two very different things. If you're decently politically engaged, I would say broadly you're probably aligned with me. Maybe you give or take a little bit in some areas, but I'd say broadly you're kind of going to give the answer that I gave.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I just think
disagree,
a lot about. I think a lot about this type of question because I think liberalism, right now, one of its big problems is that it seems, like directionless.
Yeah.
It seems like it doesn't really know where it's going. It doesn't really seem like it has much of a vision. It doesn't seem like it has too much of a forward-looking perspective in a lot of cases, and I think this is a problem.
Sure.
I think.
Wait, real quick. Do you think that that's
Yeah.
the impression that liberalism gives, or do you think that's factually true about liberalism?
I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think it's sort of complicated because I think it's a position that we've been forced into in the Trump administration, where we've become the default defenders of the institutions.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's a position that we've sort of been forced into, where we spend a lot of time defending institutions. We spend a lot of time talking about, conserving things. This is an inherently uncomfortable position to be in for a liberal because it's a conservative position. It's not a liberal position. It's not a forward-looking position. It's
to
not
some
a
extent,
forward-looking. Yeah, and so it's an inherently uncomfortable position to be in.
Just as a real quick thing for your opinion on what you're kind of talking about is I feel like one of the big issues is as we've ran out of like enemies in the world to fight or things to struggle against, and liberalism has become kind of the default. It makes it easy to kind of look around and be like, okay, well, if I have a problem, it must be with this thing, and then that's like just the assumption that everybody runs with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good story about what happened. I think another related story is that after that there, it wasn't just that we ran out of things to fight, and so. Well, I guess maybe this is the same. I'm doing a lot of prefacing here. This is the same story framed from a different way, but we sort of lost liberalism in the consensus, if that makes sense.
Nope.
In the post-Cold War system. In the post-Cold War consensus, there was basically an agreement on the principles of liberal democracy.
Okay.
We would have a system where people had rights, where we had free and fair elections, where we had some sort of market system. Over time, I think the underlying principle of those things got lost, and we lost why they were important because there was nothing to compare it against. There was no external enemy. There was no Cold War.
I do agree with that 100%. Yeah, that when you lose an enemy and then you kind of lose the opposition, you no longer start to take for granted a lot of your core things. This is actually when I made my insertion into politics in like that 2016 Gamergate era. One of my biggest frustrations when I watched the Ben Shapiros and all these losers steamroll all these kids on the left is I realized like, there's a lot of things that we kind of argue about, like what should affirmative action look like? But we not only can we not have the argument of like, should we even have things like affirmative action? We actually can't even have the argument of, do black people and white people, should they be treated the same at all? Like it felt like the intellectual defense for all of that completely wasn't there. Like it fell out from the bottom because nobody had to defend those ideas anymore. And then when you got people who were showing up in society to push against those, have you seen the movie Demolition Man?
Oh, it's been so long. Yes, but it's been so
Yeah,
long.
it was like one of those guys was brought back from their cryogenic sleep.
Yeah.
And was here to like, and the cops were like, get down. And he's like, no. And he's like, oh shit, the guy's not listening to us. We actually have no idea what to do at this point. Like, it feels like that is kind of like what's happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that Onion skit where Congress, forgets how to pass
a bill. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
By Onion skit, you mean our current like Congress or whatever, but yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
There was a funny thing the other day where JD Vance looked like he was forgetting like how he was supposed to vote on something. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Funny. So I guess maybe the thesis of what I'm trying to say here is that right now there is an enemy to liberalism, and it's the illiberal right, right? It's the illiberal right. I think they not only have leadership that's closer to the top. I think JD Vance is the closest thing we have had to an actual fascist that close to the presidency in American history. I mean, I really do think that about him.
Sure.
Donald Trump, I'm not sure has much of an ideology. I mean, he's obviously a right-wing authoritarian, but in terms of
he's a right-wing authoritarian by personality, by psychology, not even by political ideology. But Stephen Miller and JD Vance are incredibly scary people to me.
Yes,
yeah.
I call them fascists all the time, and I don't feel even a little bit bad about it.
Yeah.
And I think they crucially have some 30% base that basically agrees with them about stuff. Maybe it's not that high, maybe it's like 25, 20, but there's some base there that basically agrees with them. And I see on the left, 30% of people, they call themselves democratic socialists. And I don't feel as, I'm not a socialist, but I'm also not super concerned with the democratic socialists, because it seems like what's attracting them to that term is stuff that in any other era would have just been called like progressive liberalism. And so I wonder if we can win people back to liberalism by just adopting some of the stuff without all the baggage and the incorrect way of going about things that socialists have.
I mean, we could, but then that goes back to the first or second thing I said in that prefacing that we don't have any kind of messaging apparatus, so it makes it really scary to play that game.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's.
I don't disagree with you. Like when I hear the average person call themselves, like if the average person is like MAGA versus if I've got a guy in one room who's MAGA and a guy in another room who calls himself like a Dem sock, like my guess is going to be that I can pull the Dem sock, or we're going to have alignment in a lot of issues with a little bit of talking. And then the disagreements we have are probably just going to be, they're probably going to be factual disagreements. So like he might think that rent control is a really good idea and I might dislike rent control, but it's not going to be because we have different ideas about should there be homeless people or not. It's just going to be because we disagree on the facts of whether or not it's an effective policy. Whereas with the MAGA person, we're going to have some more fundamental conversation topics that if I argue illegal immigration even, or immigration or H-1Bs are positive for the economy, that's not enough of an argument because they're going to say, I don't care. It's okay if the economy suffers a little bit. We don't need these people in it, right? I'm going to have a more fundamental conversation. So I feel what you're saying there. I think I agree with you there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So whenever you talk about the messaging apparatus, what do you think the biggest challenges are to that sort of thing existing?
What are the biggest challenges?
What do you think stands in the way right now?
Well, so I think one of the issues is that like this has been a thing in the making for a long time. Like Republicans have been so good at controlling the media. So the answer is not going to be like a quick and easy fix. But I mean, like, oh, man. The problem is you have to figure out how to do that messaging apparatus well and that it's politically effective without being so fucking sycophantic like the conservative apparatus is, because you don't want to lose yourself in it. So like I'm sympathetic to that. I'm trying to think. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of the things that just piss me off the most. Like if you're going to have these people on your shows, I think we can't be ashamed of the things that we've done, and we have to stop hedging so much on the past. Biden was a phenomenal president in almost every conceivable way. Biden did more than, and I don't know if they would admit it anymore, but even like your tanky types or your socialist types, like Majority Report people and everything else, I think even Hassan might have even said Biden did more than anybody thought he would do legislatively. There's no need to hedge so much on everything. Like, yeah, I know that Biden was horrible on immigration and maybe he did have an open borders policy and yeah, he was definitely senile and yeah, I know. Like, don't bother. There's no need to hedge that much. When you're defending the things that you've done on your side, I think it's good to have a strong, be a stalwart defender of those things. Not that you should ignore all problems, but there are different conversations that you have in front of different people. This is a weird thing from our perspective, okay? So come with me for a second, okay? But like, pretend you're like a black person. Pretend you're a black person or pretend you're a woman, okay? If you're a black person and you're around other black people and you have complaints about black people, then you can say those and you can talk in your group of friends and it's whatever. It's, who cares? You're just, you're ranting about whatever. But if you're a black person and you're in front of a crowd of white people, even if they're all friends, when you start throwing your own like race or gender or whatever under the bus and none of those other types of people around, the character of that conversation changes so much. Do you understand kind of what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's such a bad, horrible feeling. And when you realize you're participating in it, if you care, it's a horrible feeling. And then people from the outside looking in will look at you differently, both on the black side and the white side, or the man side and the woman side. It's a very, very, very scary, bad thing to be participating in. So like I think I did this, unfortunately, and I hate myself for it. Maybe, I don't know if I could present it. But like when I would play like the good liberal talking to conservatives, right? Because in your mind, what you're trying to do, and I think it's similar from like a black person, from a woman, from a minority perspective. He's like, okay, well, I can show these people that we're not all like this, or I can show these people we can joke about this. That's fine.
Maybe a current political example would be like what the Chink Uyghur like arc that he's on right now.
No, I would eject. He's a crazy guy. I wouldn't even want to draw a parallel to that. We can talk about him if you want, though. But it's like what you think you're doing in your mind. What I thought I was doing is I'm going to another show and I'm showing you, hey, not all liberals are like this, guys. But what I'm actually doing is they're going, oh, Destiny's not like all liberals. And realizing that there are appropriate conversations to have in front of your own people, and there are different conversations you have when the enemy politically is present. I think that's an important distinction for liberals to make. Conservatives, show me anything in the media where conservatives are making concessions in front of liberals about fucking anything. Motherfuckers won't even concede the 2020 election, okay? Like, these guys are, yeah. And we don't have to be that sycophantic, but like, this is like one of like 20 things we could do, but like there are so many things. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just to shift things a little bit. One video that I'm working on right now is I'm working on a video that's talking about the traumatic moments for different generations of Democrats that I think we need to get over. And so I think for a lot of older Democrats, it's the Reagan era and the fact that liberalism as an ideology got a real shellacking in the Reagan era, and it looked like it was kind of a dead ideology. You can listen to the convention speeches of Mario Cuomo. I don't know if you've ever listened to Mario Cuomo's convention speech. He has a really famous one called The Tale of Two Cities.
Okay.
And there's another one by Ted Kennedy whenever he was running for president. And they're both just sort of decrying how liberalism as an ideology is sort of fading in the Reagan era. And I think a lot of Democrats, older Democrats, got traumatized by this to an exceptional degree, to a degree that I don't think is necessary anymore. And I think we can afford to be more forthright in our defense of liberalism, and I think we ought to be, than maybe was possible in the Reagan era or in the Clinton era.
Expand a little bit on that. When you say we got traumatized, you mean like the loss was so overwhelming for Reagan that older liberals were like, oh God, we can't defend this ideology anymore. We have to be more apologetic.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. Like they lost for 12 years. I think it was 12 years between Reagan and Bush. I mean, not between Reagan and Bush, between Reagan and Clinton. And so, I mean, I think that traumatized a whole generation of liberals who came of age during that time and are still in politics today.
Gotcha.
I think another example of something that traumatized people was the 2016 primary.
Yeah.
I think that traumatized a whole generation
of... Oh, when you on the Democratic side, you mean like between Bernie and Hillary?
Yeah,
okay.
Between Bernie and Hillary.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think the 2016 primary between Bernie and Hillary traumatized a whole generation of Democrats, particularly left-wingers, who felt like the Democratic Party was forever and always going to be screwing them.
For sure.
And this created and to some degree as well, it created bad blood between like more like centrist type Democrats and lefty Democrats. But I think the centrist Democratic main trauma is the Reagan era right now.
Sure.
And so I'm sort of working on this video that talks about, validating the fact that there's a lot of people who came of political consciousness in these eras and rightly or wrongly are impacted by them. But at some point, 2016 was 10 years ago at this point, and, the Reagan era was even longer. At a certain point, we've got to move on together, and weve got to find a new tent pole to organize ourselves around.
Yeah, that's really
'cause I- 'cause
annoying.
I-
The concept that you were talking about, because I feel like just a quick thing, I feel like the conservatives are trapped in 2016 sometimes. I just watched a clip of Hillary Clinton, and I haven't watched all this yet, I guess. And there was a conservative guy from Czechia or whatever next to her, and he's talking about like, you guys thought there were more than two genders and everything else. And it's like, if you talk to younger conservatives today, even offline, I guess I'll never admit this online, even they admit that a lot of that is like, oh god, this is so cringe. Like liberals haven't talked about this shit, and this like culminated in the whole fucking the Bad Bunny, or not the Bad Bunny, but the Kid Rock fucking halftime show where they're like, oh god, what are you guys doing? This is so fucking cringe, because they were traumatized by like the woke policing and everything from 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think to the extent that liberalism can be an ideology that lives in the moment rather than in the past, I think that's to our advantage. And the fact that, the MAGA movement is smoking the fumes of 2016 over and over and over again. I mean, I think that's to their detriment.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can build a tent pole for the party that brings together, these people that are more conservative and these people that are more socialist, And I don't think that most people who identify as Democratic, I don't think that most people who identify as Democratic Socialists are of like the Hassan type.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Agree 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that these people are basically on side. Like 99% of the time, I think they're on side.
Yeah.
I think it's the same for the more centrist types. I think they're 99% on side. I think, but it's sometimes hard to think about what unites them.
Sure.
And I think what ought to unite them is a commitment to liberalism in a strong sense, not just the liberalism of the status quo, but a liberalism that is really committed to freedom and equality, and is interested in winning elections, but at the same time is committed to like a right to healthcare, a right to housing, a right to not be dominated by these corporate interests that have embedded themselves into the government.
Sure.
I think that's, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there on what's something that can unite these kinds of actions within the Democratic Party?
I don't know, man. The first idea that comes to mind, the thing I'm having trouble with. So you have to find a way to show a genuine commitment to these principles. But then the difficult part is I don't know what that looks like, because people's complaints don't always align with what they're actually upset with, and because sometimes making progress in an area, I don't know how you get anybody to recognize it. Like I had doctor friends and researchers like would email me so much stuff that I started to speak about a little bit more, just because I didn't even I didn't have the awareness of it. But there have been so many amazing medical advancements that we've made in the United States and around the world related to different diseases, related to cancer survival rates, related to I know a lot about like different diabetic stuff. There's like so many crazy advances we made, but like nobody would know about it. And if you were to ask anybody about it or talk to, I didn't know we do single day hip replacements in the United States. I didn't fucking know. That's crazy. Like outpatient hip replacement surgery is like insane to me. But for some reason, like the right won't take credit for anything now because they hate everything, and then the left can't take credit for anything that, unfortunately, a lot of these big advancements are just going to come from large corporations, because nowadays, like, it used to be in the past, you're like, oh my God, like 1 + 1 is 2. I'm a fucking polymath now, right? But now it's like if you have a research paper, you need like 50 different co-authors because it's so many different people working on
complicated.
Things. It's so complicated.
Science advances.
Yeah. So I look at things like the mRNA vaccines, they will never get maybe someday in the future, they'll never get the credit right now that they deserve for how crazy of an advancement that was, how quick those vaccines were rolled out, and how successful they were. Everybody in the world wanted the fucking American mRNA vaccine. We destroyed the Russian one, the Chinese one. But I don't know how we bring that back to where you're giving credit to your institutions and even sometimes your corporations for doing work without just sounding like an institutional shill or sellout.
Well, I think the way that I try and straddle this line is by saying that I support the ones that really make people more free and equal and improve society, and I viciously oppose the ones that don't. I can say I'm very happy we have an advanced medical research corporate structure in the United States. I think that makes us a better country. I think that makes us more free. I think it makes us more equal because all people have better access to healthcare than they did a long time ago. Even if the insurance system that we have in the United States right now means that access to healthcare is not always
The best,
equally distributed. But in general, it makes us better as a society. It makes us better as a society to have better healthcare.
Oh, one of the things
but I can still say
yeah.
like X, like turning X into a neo-Nazi website.
Yeah,
that makes
Jesus
society
Christ.
worse.
Absolutely,
And I have no problem saying, we need to crack down on people that are making society worse, and we're fine with people that are making society better.
Yeah. Although obviously,
Sorry, what were you saying?
At some point you're gonna have to figure out what the better and worse is, because sometimes people might disagree with that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's going to be disagreements on that. Yeah, absolutely. But those are disagreements that can be worked out, internally, I guess. But the fact of the matter is that there's no contradiction, I don't think, between discriminating, on these are companies, these are corporations that make society worse, and these are ones that make society better.
Yeah.
And we're fine with the ones that make society better, and we hate the ones that make it worse.
Yeah, as long as we can accurately identify it, yeah. I was
going
to say,
but in principle.
I heard something, I don't know if this was Bannon or somebody else. Fuck, I don't think it was Bannon, it was somebody else. Somebody said something that I thought was interesting, the idea that like if you want to do great things as a government, some of these things need to be visible. Like actually, not like on a website, but like a big bridge or a big statue, that like these are things that when people see them, they're like, oh, I see that thing. The government did the thing, and there's the thing, I see it,
I agree with that.
And I am going to say this is digital, but I actually think one of the best, and this is just by narcissistic mistake, but I think one of the best like recent policy things, despite any potential problems with them, are those the Trump accounts or whatever, right? Because now you have parents who are like, oh, the government did a thing. I have an actual account for my child. It has money in it that I can see, and the government even matches some of this money, and I see it growing. That's like a thing that is like a super visible, immediately apparent. It has fucking Trump's name on it, but like I think
Trump RX.
Yeah, or well, I don't know if Trump RX is actually working out or not. I don't know what the fuck the status of that. But like I'm talking about the Trump savings accounts for the kids, right?
Yeah.
I think stuff like those types of ideas, and obviously they can't all be like that, but we have to throw people a bone every now and then on stuff like that so that there's something that we can see. Because I think one thing that sucks is that when life is running well, you don't really notice it. Like nobody knows how many times their heart fucking beats in a day or whatever, but if it stops beating, you sure as fuck notice that. So it's easy for liberalism to keep society running along, so well, and nobody really realizes it. But then it's very easy to see the problems. I think that's a difficulty that we have to figure out a better way to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quintessential example of this is Trump, putting his name on all the checks.
The
right?
Trump checks, yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, so I mean that's the quintessential example of this. But yeah, I mean, I agree that that's an important thing. Liberals need to advertise successes. At least as much, well, not even as least as much, more than we're advertising our failures, or talking about, how much we, are going to self-flagellate.
Yeah.
I think we absolutely need to be advertising our wins. I mean, hopefully that's a lesson that has been learned from the Trump era. And I don't know what form exactly that's going to take, but I mean, I agree with you in principle.
Yeah. Although I will say another unfortunate thing is there are different games that we're all playing that makes this a very difficult to win match too, in that like Democrats have to govern the fucking country, and it's getting really tiring that Republicans are just not concerned with governance. And then when Democrats come in, we have to play this dual game of like, not only do we have to figure out how to message in all the same stupid fucking meme ways that you guys do, we also have to try to fucking save this shit because you guys are setting the ship on fire every time, you guys get behind the wheel. I bring up, and I'm sure everybody brings this up now, right? Like the Obama coming into office after the global financial crisis, or Biden coming into office off of COVID. And, these Democrats having to come into office at the end of these insane global era, once in a lifetime, quote unquote, disasters, and then trying to pick up the pieces. And then a Republican is given the reins immediately, like 4 or 8 years after. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, guys. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think this is one of the reasons why eliminating the filibuster is so important, because the next Democratic administration that gets in there with the ability to do things needs to actually do them, to actually do them. You need to invoke, these icons of liberalism, FDR, LBJ. You need to just say, we're going to do big things and we're going to do them now.
Yeah.
And eliminate the filibuster. And don't even talk about, eliminating the filibuster so much. Just talk about the things that you want to do, and then eliminate the filibuster to do them.
I agree with that, because it shouldn't be about eliminating the filibuster. It should be about passing single payer or passing public. Yeah, exactly. Like, we want to do the public option. Republicans don't want you to do it. Let the Republicans. One thing that Republicans have figured out so well, I believe this. I think this is by. I don't know if this is by design. In real life, when people are like manipulative, abusive people, I think that most of this is just by you just practice a thing and it works, and they're not like thinking about it. And I think a lot of our media landscape has gotten to this point to where Republicans have taken this abuser thing and they don't even think about it. It just comes natural to them. When they're attacking all the time and you're defending all the time, I always say this: when you defend, the best thing that you can ever hope to do is keep the same ground that you're on. At best, that's your best version of a defense. But you're never attacking. And Republicans are so good at having us on the attack constantly that we don't even think about attacking. We just think about how to have like perfect defenses. I don't think we should have actually done this, but one of the things I said was like, I think it would have been interesting to shut down the government over Trump coin, only because I don't know if it would be a good idea to actually shut down the government over Trump coin. I want to hear Republicans defend Trump coin. They never have to, and they'll never have to, because they're never on the defense over it, ever. But I think it would be really interesting to say, we're going to shut down the government until Donald Trump explains what exactly is happening with that $400 million Qatari jet, just because he hasn't ever had to. And Republicans never have to fucking defend any of the shit they do. And I would be interested to hear that at some point. Maybe not over government shutdowns, but some kind of aggressive media presence would be fucking nice on this.
I like it. Let's do it. Yeah, shut down the government over that until we get Trump on. Until we get Trump on TV to answer some questions. Yeah. Why not?
And then clone. We need to do however much funding to Pfizer or Moderna or whatever to clone Caitlin Collins. I always call her Katie Collins. I think her name is Caitlin Collins. She's my favorite journalist. She's like the only one who asks questions and actually demands answers. And then when they don't answer, she restates the fact before moving on to the next one. The softball interviews for all these people in the administration, it drives me crazy. It can't be. I'm sorry, but if you want to be like a real country and you want to talk about freedom of the press and journalism and all this, it can't be that the government officials are allowed to come up to you and lie to you so blatantly and then walk away from that interview feeling like they did a good job. Like even authoritarian dictatorships do a better job at lying to their people than this Trump cabinet does. It's just, that's insane to me. I'm sure you saw the Bondi meltdown with her fucking burn book, right?
Oh yeah, that was crazy. With like the pre-written insults and stuff.
Absolutely absurd. Yeah, I forgot an illegal immigrant in every state for every senator that's asking me questions.
The Dow is at 50,000.
Yeah.
The
Oh
Dow.
my God.
The Dow. That was crazy.
Unbelievable.
She's an embarrassment to the country. I can't believe she's in charge of anything. I can't believe so many of these people are in charge.
I was gonna say she's not even the worst one. That's the unbelievable thing. Yeah.
I know. She actually knows what she's doing.
Which is even sadder. Yeah, because she was the attorney general in Florida. She's not an idiot. Not as stupid as she's acting.
Not an idiot. A lot of these guys aren't idiots. Like a lot of the senators and stuff, they're not idiots. Ted Cruz, I'm in Texas.
The lawmakers absolutely know better. Yes, Ted Cruz. Yeah.
Ted Cruz is like, he went to Yale Law School or something. And, they all put on this like good old boy affectation. There's a really funny video of Ted Cruz where he's like, I don't know, there was some sort of dust up over beer or so. Oh, maybe it was whenever Bud Light sponsored that trans influencer. I can't remember who that was.
Mulvaney or I don't know the fucking name.
I'm not sure. But all the conservatives got mad about that. And then I think this is what it was. Maybe it was some other beer related dust up. But Ted Cruz got him and a bunch of lackeys together and they all were like, I'm here drinking my non-woke beer. And then they all took turns like taking a sip of the beer. It was so performative, but it was so
performative.
Yeah, it was
like when Trump was at his fucking Super Bowl party and they were watching Bad Bunny instead of the fucking Kid Rock concert. Yeah. That's one of the things that I hate the most when I go on social media. I almost made a big post about this and I deleted it before I got 2 sentences and I was like, fuck me. Is that like everything is so fake. And I expect random people to be stupid, and I expect maybe alternative media people to be fake. But like when even the lawmakers and all of it is just so fake. Like it's so fake, and that like they know that everything they post is just such bullshit, and it drives me fucking crazy. It drives me so insane.
Yeah, no, I mean it's kayfabe. That's the word that everyone's using these days, right? That's stolen from like professional wrestling.
Oh,
kayfabe.
Yeah.
Where they're putting on the act, and but. I don't know. I don't actually know anything about professional wrestling, but I hear people talk about that term now where, all the politicians are sort of doing the show, but now the show is just the real thing.
Yep. Yeah. Well, careful. The right, not the left. Okay. The right plays this game.
Yeah.
It's gotten. Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel generally about the state of things? What do you think?
About the state of the country?
Do you think we're headed in a good direction? What do you think? Did we talk about the? No, I don't think we did because it was too far away. I feel like the scariest story right now in this country is related to that seizure of shit in Fulton County.
Yeah, no, it is really scary. I mean, I think we should expect that the Trump administration's gonna do some crazy stuff related to the midterms. I think we should just expect that that's going to happen at this point. I mean, whether or not that, whether that's, sending ICE people to sit outside polling locations, I think that, is a potential possibility as a form of voter intimidation. I think we should just expect that some crazy stuff is going to happen.
I also don't like that states are more... It feels like the Republican states are more on board with the bullshit too, which I think is really scary. Like,
in what way?
So I don't know if you remember this, but so first of all, Donald Trump's been claiming that like every fucking election since 2008, I think, has been rigged. He's made these claims always. When he won the election in 2016, he put together a voter fraud commission to try to prove that I think he was saying there were 3 million illegal votes, because he wants to say that he beat Hillary Clinton in the popular vote, but the illegal votes are the ones that made it so, it didn't. So he was going to try to find 3 million illegal votes. When he put together that commission, the commission disbanded, I think, in a few months because they, quote unquote, couldn't find anything. The reason why they couldn't find anything is because the only thing the commission did is once they were put together, the commission reached out to all 50 states, and then the commission said, we want all of your voter registration data. And every single state, blue and red, said, fuck off. We're never doing this. This is never happening. And then I think they threatened to sue, they did something, and nothing happened, because they're like, no, this is our voter data. We don't owe you this. This is the federal government. Never. But I think that I've seen, I don't know if I read an article on this or if I saw a tweet or something, I think some states are being more cooperative now with that. I would need to Google that to check, but they're not, like, some of the red states are not as protective of this stuff now, and they seem more willing to cooperate with kind of the crazy Trump stuff. And the only limiting factor on whether or not Trump impedes in the midterms, honestly, they're only held back by their own incompetence. If the administration was more competent, I would be willing to wager a big poly market bet that they will try to meaningfully intervene in the midterms, but they're so incompetent that they might not figure out how to. But if the states start cooperating with them, then who knows? Yeah. That's scary to me.
I think who knows? I think it's a situation where people ask me about this and tell me, they ask whenever I'm on stream. I've had questions like, what should we be doing about like the Trump administration trying to meddle with the elections? And I'm hesitant to say anything other than just like go vote. Go vote. Ensure that you vote, ensure that you're registered to vote, ensure that you're getting other people to go vote. Because really, if we're in a situation where the Trump administration is just going to outright like cancel elections or do any of this type of blatant, stuff, we're in a whole different world at that point. And I'm not willing to go there until we're in a point where the Trump administration is like actively canceling elections. I mean, whenever I get questions like this, I just say, we're not there yet. I think we should be worried about it. But at the same time, it shouldn't change what you're going to do as an average person, which is go vote.
Yeah.
You should go vote. You should go vote for every Democrat available. And that's it. And if we're in a world after the midterms where the Trump administration has canceled the elections or something, we will, cross that Rubicon whenever we get there.
Yeah. I do think, I don't know how we change this talking point because it requires a lot of finesse. But one thing I keep trying to stress to people when they talk about, do you know who Asmongold is?
I'm familiar.
Okay. He's like the largest streamer on Twitch, I think, by viewer hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he does a lot of MAGA. He's basically a 100% like MAGA aligned political talking head. And, one of the things that he says, he'll tweet out things where he says commonly, like, I think these people should be tried for treason and executed, or he'll support Trump when Trump says things like this. And one common talking point that I get from people on the right, and then sometimes I even hear people on the left say things like this, like, well, he's saying they have to try them. He's not saying they just like execute them summarily or whatever. They're talking about trials and stuff. And one thing I wish more people understood is that like nobody like no political leader just executes political opponents. Like there are always charges, you know, even in a dictatorship, like there are always charges. It's not like Saddam Hussein was like, I'm killing these people because I'm fucking evil, you know. It's because these people committed treason to the party and they were collaborators and they were assisting the enemies of the state. Like there are always reasons, and I think people need to be a little bit more cognizant of it. So like elections won't be canceled and ICE won't stop people from voting, but there might be enhanced security protocols at-risk voting places due to a large number of potential illegal immigrants voting, right? That would be how that manifests. That would be the furthest it goes. They're not going to say, we're sending ICE to fuck over the polling stations, right? It's going to be what I just said. And I feel like people aren't cognizant of that sometimes, or how to argue against it on the left, or rather they're talking about it as like they're going to try to cancel elections. And I don't even disagree. I say that, right? Like that is what they're going to try to do. But it is frustrating, I guess. Maybe I'm just venting that sometimes people will say things like, oh, well, it's okay because there was a trial, or like, well, they indicted Letitia James. It's like on mortgage fraud, really, you know? Yeah, I
think we need to be comfortable with the fact that like 30% of the country is just going to buy that when it happens. You know, they're just going to buy it. You know, I think whatever percentage of the population defends January 6th is going to be the percentage of the population that defends the trumped up charges.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think if anyone that's still living in the world where they don't think that there's a percentage of the American population that's just amenable to, you know, authoritarian takeover, I think is delusional at this point. I think it's clearly there. I don't think it's the majority. And I believe that the American people will ultimately redeem this country if we go down that path. But yeah, I mean, I worry a lot about states like mine, like Texas, that are sort of it's not exactly a battleground state, but you know, especially depending on who wins the Republican and Democratic Senate primaries, there's going to be a lot of money flowing into the state. I think I'm very worried about like voter suppression happening in South Texas, where there's a large Hispanic population, and a population that, at least according to the polls I've seen recently and reports that I've seen recently, is swinging against Trump.
I've heard also that because the way you guys did your redistricting, that the assumption was going to be that those 2024 Trump numbers would like hold steady for like Hispanic population and everything.
Hispanic voters.
Yeah, and there's a chance that swings. Yeah, I don't know how true that is, but
I've heard this too. I have not verified that for myself, but I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of the redistricting was sort of based on the assumption that Trump would hold most of the gains with Hispanic voters. And so I do worry that if it looks like those elections are heading in the wrong places because Texas is a Republican-controlled state, because Greg Abbott is who he is, that there might be like voter suppression in Texas.
Yeah. Also, look at the difference real quick in your guys's. You had, I think you needed a quorum to vote on your redistricting maps or whatever. And I think a couple Democrats figured that like if they fled the state, that quorum wouldn't be reached. And then they were able to delay the vote on that.
I worked in the state legislature whenever that happened one time.
Oh.
I worked for, yeah.
Well, very nice. And I thought that was I thought that was a cute idea. Their response to that was, I don't remember if the president said he was going to start extraditing people from one state to the next. And then I think they started locking the lawmakers into the hall once they got back to the state so that they had to be there for the quorum.
Yep.
Notice the difference between that. This was state elected people for a state representation, you know, trying to find a cute loophole on that vote. And then compare that to the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, where the federal government swooped these people off into other states to protect them and didn't even release their fucking identities, right? Like the difference in how far they're willing to go to attack their enemies and protect their own is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't even know what happened to those ICE people.
Yeah,
were they
going to be
charged?
No.
Probably not.
Will they be? Maybe. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what they're waiting for in the investigation. I don't know what else they can find. I don't know. I'm pretty sure the government said they're not sharing any data or anything. The FBI is not cooperating at all with any of the local officials. So who the fuck knows? That's insane, though, right?
I am really happy that the Trump administration was basically defeated in Minneapolis, though. I'm very proud of the people in Minneapolis who got out there day
You
after
say
day
that,
protest.
and in a way I agree with you, but man, does that play into what I said earlier about how when you're on the defensive, all you can ever do is hold your ground. So like, we're happy, that's cool, but like, we're happy that an ICE deployment that was done to Minnesota off the backs of a fraud video, like the video was fraudulent, that Nick Shirley, the cognitively impaired kid, right? That ICE deployment happened. However many people were captured. However many citizens were harassed. 2 citizens were killed by ICE. And then like the celebration is, okay, well, we got ICE to largely withdraw from the state at least. And it's like, damn, that was like the starting position, you know? not to say that we shouldn't be happy with the Minnesota, like people that were able to get them finally kicked out. That's amazing. But like, god damn, that's so brutal, you know?
I mean, I think it's basically the optimal thing that could have happened from that situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggle to think of what would have been a better outcome.
The problem is that when you have an opponent who is, I'm trying to defend post right now, but like when you have an opponent who's willing to go to the mat and you're not, and they always know that, you're always kind of in a losing position. Like, and I think one of the big issues is that if Republicans know that Democrats are going to waver every time push comes to shove, they can always play into that. And sometimes I wonder if, and I'm not saying we should have a civil war, but if they knew Democrats were as willing to push it that far, like imagine that ICE shooting happens and imagine immediately after those agents are arrested by like Minnesota State Police or Minneapolis local police. Like that situation would probably look a whole lot different. I think a lot of ICE officers would be reconsidering a lot of stuff. And I think the federal government would be reconsidering a lot of stuff. I think that they would be in a much more uncertain position. Whereas right now, like I think they feel pretty good about things. Like, yeah, they withdrew from Minnesota, but you know, how much of their agenda did they get done there? How much were they allowed to do it at all? That clearly they don't give a fuck about winning other elections. So
I think at a certain point though, you got to maximize the narrative value of the wins that you can take.
For sure.
And I think in Minnesota, I'm happy calling that a win. But what was his name?
I would agree.
Guy that dressed up like the Nazi, and you know he got like demoted. Bovino, that guy, he got demoted. So we lost they had to reshuffle people. They had to bring in Homan or whatever, and then they basically withdrew.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy calling that a Trump administration failure, Democratic victory for the protesters in Minneapolis. I'm happy calling that a win.
Yeah,
and I think it's an inspiring story to tell about the power that people have whenever the Trump administration comes to your city to occupy it, and they can be effectively resisted. By concerted effort, they can be effectively resisted. And
I loosely agree with you, just because I definitely want to stand with people in Minnesota, and in a loose sense I agree with you. But man, I hope it doesn't take the murder of American citizens to get the feds. And not even like the real feds, okay, but fucking ICE to leave your state, because that's for the United States too, that's a very sad state of affairs. And then also
sad.
What we were talking about before in terms
Trump
of
is president.
In terms of like what people actually care about or what people are willing to stand on, right? Like this is like your classic big bad federal government versus state governments, and to see all the Republicans, all the "Don't Tread on Me" guys cheering it on is just like Jesus.
Yeah, well, no, I mean I totally agree. It's a very sad state of affairs. But that's all I have to say about it. I guess. I mean, it is sad.
It sucks.
It really sucks. But at the same time, that's the situation we find ourselves in, and we can't really do anything but go forward.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's a great point to say. I think I've probably said all I need to say about that. Let me ask you one more question. In terms of our congressional leadership, I'm sure you've talked about this some. Do you have any thoughts on the continuation of the Schumer-Jeffries duo?
I just don't like the way Jeffries talks. I know that's very... I feel like an asshole, but sometimes I wonder how much candor and shit matters now, since apparently that's all Americans fucking care about. I did appreciate... I don't remember when. This was months ago, but I remember seeing Jeffries. Some guy was chatting, another lawmaker, and Jeffries was like shouting him down. And for the first time, I was like, oh, that was actually pretty base. He was like, holding him to task on things. I don't know enough about the inner workings of the Senate and how much... Like, is Schumer actually, like outplaying the Republicans at times with the shutdown? The last time there were some people who said he was, other people said he wasn't. Like the leadership in Congress requires strategic moves that don't always necessarily look good, especially to the Twitter fan bases. So, like, I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm just not sure sometimes Like, I know Pelosi was hated by everybody, but Pelosi was a fucking demon in Congress. Like, that lady could raise money. That lady could whip votes. That lady could get anything done. If it was doable, like, Pelosi was the person who could do it. I don't know if Schumer is necessarily the same in the Senate. I just don't know. I don't, not like I don't know, like, I have doubts about him. I'm not well read enough into it. How do you feel, I guess, for House and Senate leadership? What do you think that should look like?
I think part of being an effective leader right now is being an effective communicator. And I don't think that Chuck Schumer and Jeffries are that, unfortunately. Whatever else. I think that they've lost the confidence of people. And right now, what the Democratic leadership needs a lot of is leadership.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're doing a good job providing it. There was a funny headline that I saw about Schumer the other day that I really think encapsulates my problems with him and his sort of communication strategy. So the headline is, DHS to shut down with no end in sight amid standoff over ICE. So great job, Democrats. Subtitle, quote, I have looked at the polling data. The public is crying out for change, Chuck Schumer said. And it's like, okay,
Why would you say that?
I appreciate the value of the polls, but like, it's every time with this guy. It's like the polls say this, the polls say that, the polls do this, the polls do that, I do this, and it's just, it can never be with Chuck Schumer a principled stand about anything.
Or even it doesn't have to be a principled stand, but at least present it that way, Like
present it that way. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
If somebody were to ask an Olympic athlete, like, how were you able to do it, right? The answer people want to hear is like, I've got a lot of perseverance. My mom, like, they don't want your training routine, like
not, or not, well, I was born with a 20% larger natural lung capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. And my torso actually is quite adept in terms of swimming and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Schumer, the communication or whatever is just it doesn't feel.
It's not good.
Who I miss, and it sucks because I think all these people are quite to the left of me when I think of good communicators. Where is AOC at? What's she been up to? Because I feel like I don't hear her as much.
AOC.
Yeah.
I feel like AOC was in Munich recently.
Okay.
Did you see that?
I haven't.
At the Munich Security Conference.
Probably going to watch a lot of this after our talk because I haven't seen any of that yet. But I feel like I haven't seen her as much on the domestic stage, like just like talking about things or messaging at all. Is there a reason why, or what do you think? Like over the past 2 months,
when
I feel like
Congress
I haven't.
is in session, it's harder. Well,
it's not like they're doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the last recent thing. I mean, obviously she was involved with the Zoran campaign to some extent.
Sure.
I mean, she did a rally with him. And she obviously was doing the fight oligarchy rallies for a while. That was a while back, though, at this point.
Sure.
I don't know. It's great for me whenever I see her out there.
Yeah, I agree.
I like to see her out there. I like to see all these people out there. And I think you're pointing to something that is a real market opportunity, and it's right now being filled basically only by Gavin Newsom.
Yeah. And like,
for
I really
people
like
that are not Democratic socialists that are willing to get out there and do stuff like that.
Yeah, I really like, he's significant with me, but I really like Mamdani. I like the way that he communicates on everything.
I like Mamdani too.
Amazing stage presence. He's really good at answering questions where he'll like identify a problem, give a solution, and then give a specific policy, like a thing that he actually specifically wants to do. I really appreciate the way that he navigates everything. But like, New York City mayor, like where I need my national, even Newsom is California governor. I know governor's a bigger position, but like, where am I? Who I really like, but I think she's too much in my ballpark. I think I don't know if like the messaging is popular nationally. I really like Jasmine Crockett, but I think she's a little bit too much for most people, maybe. But where are the rest of
Jasmine Crockett. She's funny. I like her takedowns of people.
Yes. But we need more. We need more. I don't know. We need more of them. Yeah. Oh, there's another guy who's also really funny, and I always forget his fucking name. When he was questioning Bondi, he had the sign up that was blank, and he was like, "I'll write down my rating for what you have him in your burn book." Which congressman am I thinking of, guys? I always forget his name. I love this. Jared Moskowitz. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Oh, and I like Raskin too. These guys need to get on TV more. I don't know how. Every time I see them in hearings or whatever, I love listening to them, to both of those guys speak. They need to get on CNN, Fox News, whatever the fuck they need to do.
They can come on your show.
Well, yeah, obviously they want to, yeah, for sure. But they need to be in front of the more Democrats and like mainstream audiences. I want to see these guys like making the rounds more. I wish I saw them more instead of, oh, here's the 57th stupid fucking interview with Besant, where I get to hear probably the dumbest take on economics I've ever heard in my entire life again, rivaled only by the last take this guy gave on the state of the economy,
Yeah, no, I definitely want to see more Democratic voices getting out there being being vocal, being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a real market. Not to make I don't know. Not to make
Not to
it
sound
too
like
market sound.
Schumer.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but
That's
there's
a real market opportunity.
There's
Mm-hmm.
a market opportunity there for someone that's willing to be out there. This is why Newsom's so popular. I
Yeah.
think this is why AOC is so popular among the base. People who aren't necessarily ideological.
Yeah.
But again, sort of to bring it back, you see someone like AOC, Bernie, these people get out there and they're hammering the administration. And what do those people call themselves? They call themselves democratic socialists. Well, that sounds like me then.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that I'm not a socialist, I'd like to see liberals do better at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else?
I guess not that I can think of right now. You think that you think the midterms? Do you think they'll generally go off well, or what do you? I guess we kind of talked about this earlier, but we didn't really.
I think it's going to be exceptional. I think it's going to be go off well in terms of like
interference from the administration. If we vote, if everybody gets to vote, I think I hope, and I think it's going to be a bloodbath. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bloodbath in a political way,
option,
not in a. Sorry, just to clarify.
The only option that we have is to right now is to just believe that it's gonna work, that it's gonna work out, that the institutions will basically function. Because what I would really hate to do is demotivate anyone from voting because they think it doesn't matter.
For sure.
It absolutely does matter, and I want everyone to go out there and vote. Tell everyone else to go out there and vote. So I don't know. To me, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it obviously does matter whether things go off without a hitch or not, but it doesn't change what the average person should do, which is go vote. So,
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I wish you could focus on, or not you, the general you. I wish people would focus more on, like when you think about like what's important or what matters. You'll hear a lot of people on the far left will say things like, voting doesn't matter, you can't do anything to change it or whatever. But then when you look at the fights that the right is taking on, so much of it is over trying to disenfranchise voters, and I feel like that communicates something.
I think that so many people on the left who think that doesn't, maybe not, the internet poison ideological people, but so many of the regular rank and file people on the left who consider themselves to be on the left of the Democratic Party and think that there's just not much there for them could be dissuaded from that position if the Democratic Party won power and actually did some stuff. If we were willing to eliminate the filibuster and do some stuff, I think that a lot of those people could be won over.
I kind of agree with you. I think that would be a way to do it. But somehow the Republican Party is so good at this. I'm sure I made the same complaint last time. Like this idea that they genuinely believe, 70+% of Republicans genuinely believe that 2020 was a rigged election. Like they don't think that the outcome of that election was legitimate. But that doesn't discourage any of them from voting somehow. I don't know. Like they really, really, not like, two parties. They really do truly believe the Democrats are rigging elections and they still go out and vote. Something is happening there that we need to capitalize on because, my God, when it comes to voting, those people do not fuck around. They take it very fucking seriously.
There's nothing else to do when you're 65, Stephen.
True, actually. I guess. That and watch Fox News, I guess.
To do. Yeah, you sit around, watch Fox News, and when election day is.
Yeah.
If you're watching Fox News all day. I saw a funny thing once that was like the average time of someone watching cable news on like CNN or MSNBC or MS Now. Sorry, now it's MS Now, but it's like I don't know, a couple hours, and the average time that Fox News is on is like 8 hours or something. It's like some ridiculous amount of time because people will just keep it on all day and they won't change the channel. And so you're just mainlighting this stuff like over and over again, day after day. And
I bet a lot of that. Well, no, I guess the average age of all those run pretty high. But I'm just curious. I wonder if if the average age is higher, like a retired person is much more likely to have the news on for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
I also think that the average person who is a conservative, that conservatism, I feel like takes over all the areas of their life so much more than like a liberal. Like I feel like if you're a liberal, and I don't mean like a hardcore progressive wokey type or whatever, just like a normal like Democrat voter, I feel like that's not that's usually not your entire fucking identity. But god damn, I feel like for the MAGA shit, like when you got to the point to where there's fucking measles outbreaks in the United States again, I feel like for some reason that MAGA stuff encroaches like so many different aspects of your identity, from your position on foods and drinking raw fucking milk and not getting your children vaccinated and not believing in schools and thinking that coal is good. It bleeds over into so much of your life and personality. I don't know why.
Yeah. I have no idea either. I wonder sometimes about that. I really don't know. I wish I could tell you why that is. Maybe, I mean, some of that has to be literally because of Fox News too.
Sure.
I think like they're all like, so many of these people are watching the same stuff, so they've all got similar stuff to talk about. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder about that. What causes that? One ancillary point that I'd really like to make is I'd really love for liberals to start embracing, there was a trend, I don't know if it started in your community or if it started in somewhere else, but it spread to your community, of people making these like it was like memes of liberal stuff. Have you seen these? It was like libwave.
Oh, that probably came from I've seen it before. I feel like this probably came from the neoliberal subreddit, which is like the
I don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
But like, the memes themselves, maybe so, but I really liked the idea of embracing the longer historical liberal tradition.
Yeah.
People like FDR, people like LBJ, Abraham Lincoln, Yeah. I really liked the idea of embracing that historical tradition. One of the reasons I call myself a liberal is because I feel like I come from that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know anything about Eugene Debs. I don't know anything about, beyond what you have to read in college. I don't know much about, Marx or any of these people. It would be inaccurate for me to call myself a socialist. I don't come from the socialist tradition at all. I come from an American liberal tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And it disappoints me sometimes when I see, liberals afraid to claim those people in a forthright way, because they're popular. Those people are popular. They're popular instantiations of a liberal ideology, I think. FDR talked about, the four freedoms. Freedoms, that's liberal stuff. So anyway, that's just sort of an ancillary point that I wanted to make.
Yeah, I agree. There's a weird thing where it's like everything on your side has to be cringy. I think some of this goes into what I spoke about, and I might have brought this up in our first conversation, is that we need to talk about things as more kind of like opportunities rather than like finger waving on everything. That, like diversity, I feel like when a diversity argument or a conversation is being had, it kind of feels like this like great obligation that's thrust upon the white man to take on.
Oh yeah, that's a horrible, that's a horrible way to think about it.
As opposed to viewing it as like the really cool access that we have to so many different things, even for people that are anti-fucking diversity, all the benefits that people are getting from having so much different like culture, so many different things that like just come through the United States. Same thing even with like when it comes to things like as weird as it is, like taxes or whatever, like I think that there are things in the United States that we should fund, and I think we should all want some of these things funded. Like we should agree that some of these things need to be funded, and then we should tax appropriately there, rather than kind of like framing it as this weird like retributive tool to use against billionaires or like ways to punish wealthy people who we say don't carry their fair share. There's obviously good conversations to be had about effective taxation, but we get so hung up on these like weird like retribution taxes, like wealth taxes that like in effect would raise like on the scale of like 10 to 20 billion dollars if implemented perfectly and enforced, as opposed to like we should just like bump all the like the top four tax brackets, just bump them up by like 2 or 3 points, and you've got like that's an extra like 300 billion a year. Like it's so much more money. It's such an easy implementation, just repeal the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, like boom, and maybe you can make permanent if you want some of the lower ones, but like oh god.
Yeah, we need ammunition in the war on poverty, Stephen. I don't know what to tell you there. That's true. Yeah. I mean, I think talking about, I think it's really bad whenever people get caught up in the wonky discussions of like tax policy instead of what the taxes are going to fund.
Yeah.
Like I understand that incentives are important and all that stuff, but whenever you're talking about politics, you should talk about the positive things that you want to do more than you want to talk about, like, I don't know, just whether or not we're going to shift the tax policy around, by X and Y% or whatever. The effect, a good example of this, talked about it a little bit earlier, was the Trump tariffs. Mm-hmm. The effect of the tariffs is going to be raising a little bit of money, but that's not how they were pitched.
For sure.
Primarily. Yeah. They were pitched, as part of this whole other Trump plan. But anyway.
Yeah.
that argument probably makes sense already.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was great talking.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know we've already gone over.
No, you're good. Have you talked to Have you talked to anybody else in like the kind of like the lib politics circle? Like, have you talked to like Pisco or IRI or Josiah or any of these guys?
I went on Lib and Learn, that podcast, and I've talked to Hutch twice on his stream.
Okay. You should talk to IRI at some point. That guy is like super big-brained electoral politics.
I'd love to. I love talking to anybody. I have, I'd love talking to everybody about liberalism. That's my big hobby horse right now. I think liberalism needs to be better, and I'm trying to make it better. That's sort of what my community is all about. Trying to make liberalism better. Cool. I think so. I'd love to talk to any of those people. Yeah, if anyone has a connect to you said IRI. Yeah, I've talked to him a little bit, I believe, on Live and Learn. So I'd love to.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen his side gig.
His side, what, the debating TikToker people?
No, isn't he the one that he was in the Offspring music video, right?
Oh my God, embarrassing thing. He was we were supposed to talk a while ago, and he was in Europe, and he this isn't that embarrassing. I just hyped this drive way too much. But yeah, that is his side thing. I remember he sent me a message where he was like, "Oh, like I'm busy. I'm doing my Offspring thing later." And I thought he was like spending time with his family. I didn't even know he had kids. and then I realized afterwards the next day, I was like, "Oh, I'm so fucking stupid." Yeah. But yeah, he's that guy. Yeah.
Coolest side gig in the world. Yeah. Coolest side gig in the world. Oh man. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Getty. I'm on YouTube. I make politics videos.
Cool.
Thank you so much for having me on, Stephen.
Yeah. Have a good one, man.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. I'm linking his channel in chat. Here you go. Oh, fuck. I thought it was just Texas. FYI, 11 states have handed over or agreed to hand over unredacted voter registration lists with an agreement to remove people from the voter rolls that the DOJ identifies as illegitimate. The DOJ is suing 24 other states and DC for their lists. That's scary. The reason why that's scary, this is part of what we do with like GOTV, Get Out the Vote campaigns or voter registration drives. I think the reason why this is scary is because I'm making this up. If somebody can find the answer really quick, I don't know the exact number, but like I think it's either all states or most states, you can't register and vote on the same day. So what can happen sometimes is you show up to vote, even in a state with like no voter ID at the time of voting or anything else, but you show up and you're like, oh hey, I'm in this district. My name is Stephen Monell, and they look you up and they're like, wait a second, how do you spell your last name? It's like Bonnell, Bonnell. I don't have you here. You're not registered to vote. And it's like, oh, I'm disenfranchised. I have no vote. I can't. It's too late. I missed the registration date, and you're done. You don't get to vote in that election. And part of this whole obsession with purging voter lists and all this shit is I think that is the goal. Is that type of stuff. Let me hold on. Somebody says this, so I don't get this completely wrong. What states allow same-day voter registration and when? Okay, maybe it's like half that don't. Some do, some don't. Let's see. Same-day registration. 1, 2, 3. DC, no one cares. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-ish, 15, 16. I don't know the old one. 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so about half do, half don't. You can also cook where MAGA people are registered to create MAGA leads in areas where they literally don't live. Oh, maybe. I don't know if they would do that. So there's a game plan for us and the rest of the Dems to spread awareness about all of this ahead of time and make sure people check if they've been removed. Yeah, this is part of like the get out the vote thing, is making sure people are aware that they're registered and everything else, yeah.